Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm going to try to keep everybody on schedule. What I always tell the audience is, you really make the difference in making these sessions great, so I hope you have great questions. We're going to leave the last, I think, 10 or 15 minutes for questions, so if you could be thinking of these questions as you hear our panelists speak, we'll have a great exchange at the end that will really make this a worthwhile program. We have a very distinguished panel, and I'm going to briefly introduce them again for you, and not in any particular order, but we have Rosanna Dorothy. Rosanna, if you could raise your hand. She's with Cigna, Chief Diversity Officer, and she leads the Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence. Steve Ray, down there on the end. Steve is the Chief Professional Development Officer at Apollo Education Group, and we've all heard of Apollo. He works with the company's efforts to connect Apollo with the needs of employers. So he's right on target of what we're going to be talking about today. Jenny Moore is Assistant Vice President of Technology and Development for AT&T. She's responsible for pivoting the skills of employees at AT&T. And Sharon Wibben is Senior Vice President for Global HR at Walmart, and she is the architect of STEM programs for Walmart. She's previously worked at Delta and Xerox, also companies that we've all heard of. Finally, DeEtte Gray. DeEtte is President of BAE Systems Intelligence and Security Sector. This part of BAE has 10,000 employees and does $2 billion in annual revenue. That's billion with a B. So let me get started with the panel. Our first question, now when we talk about STEM, sometimes we can fall into a trap of too narrowly defining what STEM really is all about, and we don't want to do that. And this first round of questions kind of gets at that. So Rosanna, as much as we talk about the gap in technical skills that employees need, my understanding is that Cigna is finding benefits in hiring people with more well-rounded backgrounds instead of just narrowly focused in STEM. Can you tell me why that is, and are educational institutions turning out the sorts of people that Cigna is looking for?
Certainly, John. Good morning, everyone. I'm standing in for John Staines, so pleased to represent our organization in this conversation. I think when we look at talent, one of the things that's essential to the work we do is we serve customers who come from different backgrounds, different experiences. We know that healthcare is one of the top 3 concerns in the world, affordability of healthcare in particular. And so the ability to drive an innovative culture, in many ways the ability to fuel what we consider a 224-year-old startup environment in healthcare really requires that we have people with better, broader experiences and education. You know, our workforce in and of itself is a workforce that has evolved from a series of individuals with great and very deep subject matter expertise to embrace a more consumer-oriented environment where consumers are at choice, consumers seek transparency, consumers seek to be the owners empowered around matters and choices of health. So it naturally would follow that when we seek talent, we're seeking individuals who bring a deeper but broader education that isn't just about the particular discipline. I mean, we don't hire people who are healthcare professionals except for nurses and physicians, and we really have relatively few of those in our environment. We hire business people. We hire people who are able to innovate the what's next in health services. And I think what we would add to that from a standpoint of diversity, we have to hire people who understand the communities our customers come from, to recognize that the systems that regulate health and well-being are understood, easily accessible, easily navigatable for those customers that we serve. So it's a very different world for us when we think about the talent that we bring in. In the second part of your question, do we find enough of that talent, or educational institutions producing enough of it? I'd say no. It's still a challenge for us, as it is for many. We are playing with the formulas. So some of the approaches that we've had in the past and relationships we've had in the past, much like the markets that we're in, have been disrupted. And one of the speakers earlier talked about the importance of disruption. The ability to attract different talent has required us to be more agile in our approaches with relation to where we find talent and how we're finding that talent, as well as how we're onboarding that talent very differently. Very few people grow up saying, I want to work in insurance. And I've tested that even with my own colleagues. So it also means, how do we portray the story, as we heard earlier, of what we do? How do we humanize that and make it relevant to a new generation of talent, while also making it relevant to an existing generation of talent that had never considered careers in our industry, whether on the product side, where they're actually constructing the kinds of offerings that constitute the benefits you as employees and companies would receive, or whether they're in our technology organization or informatics organizations, where the demand for big data is far greater, where the demand for analytics is significant, where our ability to create the kinds of technologies that we see emerging in the current environment, mobile technologies, certainly the use of gamification so that individuals have a better understanding of how to make decisions and choices, are all things that are very new to our industry and very new in what we're seeking in our workforce. So ideally, we need more partners on the education side who recognize that and are creating that. And I think the earlier conversation around community colleges in many ways was sparking a bit of an epiphany for a couple of us in the back, because we recognize there are certain opportunities to do this differently that haven't been very present.
Okay. I was told they were having a little difficulty hearing us in the back, but I also feel like the mics were just bumped up a little bit, and we'll do our best to project up here also, but keep me if you can't, we'll ask the microphone person to keep the volume levels up. So Steve, building on what Rosanna just said, I know that Apollo has a coding school, and for people to get trained in this area, they don't have to have technical backgrounds. In fact, do take care of that. And I understand that you found success in this program with people trained in things like music and the arts and non-technical backgrounds. Now, my daughter is starting college next year, and I preached to her that she needed to get something practical in her educational setting, not necessarily a philosophy degree, because she needed something that workplaces need, right? But apparently I'm wrong in that, in hearing some of you speak. So is it wrong to focus students too much in these technical areas, and should they be broadening their horizons more than narrowing in the technical skills that are needed in the workplace?
Well, I think they in a way all go hand in hand, but I think the dilemma a little bit is that when you think of STEM, you might draw a picture of Urkel in your head, or that it's this idea that it's very, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. I have 3 boys. They're all in what I would consider to be STEM-related fields of study and work. But they're not what you would think of as kind of the traditional STEM candidate. And I think the first thing we have to recognize is that it's a platform for creativity, right? And if we express it that way, I think you can actually make STEM appealing to a broader audience, because whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or an engineer working at IBM, I think what those individuals share in common is they like to be creative, they like to solve problems, and STEM is their toolbox. So what a coding school represents in that, my oldest son, he's 22, partially went to college, took a gap year, and then kind of didn't really want to go back. And the reason he didn't want to go back is because he was in 4 bands. He played bass. He was a musician. And so I said, we just invested in this coding school. Why don't you go try it out? And so his experience going through that was the sort of the first 2 weeks was, well, I don't really know what they're teaching you. They just give you a bunch of assignments. The second phase of his experience was, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to finish this. It is so incredibly difficult. And then in the last phase, it was sort of like he built an application, a very difficult application to build with scheduling software and said, I can't believe how much I've learned. And what's interesting about that is it took place in 12 weeks. He learned a language. But where I tie this back to the sort of idea of creativity is, if you're a musician, what you know is a structure and a language. That's fundamentally what it is. And in fact, I read an article once that said Johann Sebastian Bach had to be a mathematician because when you look at his music, it's mathematically perfect. So I think it's about expanding the way we think about STEM to attract a broader audience of people that wouldn't necessarily identify, and then providing pathways that can get them into those jobs, very meaningful, high-paying jobs, in abbreviated ways.
Okay, DeEtte, Steve mentioned analytical skills and the ability to analyze. And I know at BAE, you've seen a need for people not just to have the technical skills, but to be able to work in teams and to work with other people and to be able to solve problems. What have you done at BAE to sort of bring this along for your workforce?
So if you're not familiar with BAE Systems, we're the third largest defense contractor. Across the company, we have 80,000 employees in 40 different countries. And our real mission is protecting national security. So you think about the problems that our governments have around the world, it's very important that our employees have the skill sets to help solve those problems. And those problems change. If you watch the news, you understand the threats in the world. So we hire very highly skilled employees at all different levels. We're making anything from airplanes to submarines to, in my business, it's more about the people. So we are the services part. So I have Intel analysts and software coders, but you think about what they're working in, they're really they work side by side with the government. Here's a national crisis that we have. You think about the cyber threats. And so what they automatically in their jobs have to work together as teams. And so one of the things you think, if you get some of the more junior employees that come in, it could be you're out of college, we hire a lot right out of the military. What we do is put them in teams with really senior experienced people that have the knowledge and the experience of frankly working through the problem solving part of it with junior people. And along the lines they learn really the process of problem solving. I would say, I think that's a skill that we've lost in this nation. It's great that people have, when we do get students that are in technical backgrounds, engineering, but they don't really know how to apply that engineering. And in business, whether it's in a really technical group or just in a business, even business problems that we're trying to solve are very complex. As you said earlier, there's a lot of data out there. And so, we hire data scientists, and it's not just about the coders that can go through and process the data, and here's a graph with the data on it. It's really about what does that data mean, and what does it tell us? One of our businesses is we provide Intel analysts. So you think about all the data that they are looking at, and their job is really to help the government look for patterns, and you really have to have those problem-solving skills. But the way we really do it is by getting senior people that have the experience and the knowledge teamed up with more junior people. And everything we do in our business is in teams. There's not, whether it's a financial group trying to solve a problem or a technical team solving a problem, it's always groups and teams of people. So for those of you that are in education, which I know a lot of this audience is, it's really important to continue to build those skills through the education system at the same time, so they know how to work in teams to solve those kind of problems.
So Jenny, when people come out of college and they get their training, regardless of their degree or skill level, they sometimes don't know exactly what they want to do for a career path. And my understanding is that AT&T has crafted an effort to reach out to those kinds of workers and potential workers. So what has AT&T done exactly?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we recognize, as anyone in the room has college-age students, as I do, it's kind of really hard to expect them to know exactly what they want to be when they grow up, right? When they're 18, 19 years old and entering college. And so sometimes they'll figure it out in college and sometimes not till later. But I think the important thing is we've done two things. One is we have an 18-month program. So all of our college hires come in together. They graduate as a class. So it's an extension of their college life, right? Because they're growing up with this, community of partners that they'll have long-standing relationships throughout their careers at the company. And so what they'll do, though, is we define 82 different roles that we have within the company. And so they have the availability to go out and start maybe being a software engineer, but maybe, 2 years in, they decide, well, I've experienced a Scrum Master role, maybe I'd really want to go to that side of the house. And so there's the ability in the curriculum to help them and the job openings for them to move there. And so how this all plays back is that they come in, they're 18 months in the program, they do 3 rotations of jobs, so they experience 3 different jobs. Now they may stay technical, they may know right away they want to be software engineers, yet they may want to they just don't know because they haven't tasted something else, so they'll go and start working in another area, and then if they want to change, they can still do that within the program or even after the program. The real benefit, I think, for that is when we're trying to acquire, right? So on the college campuses, we also hire folks with nano degrees, we hire from diverse programs. But, so it's really hard for them to know, but it's an attractor because they go, wow, I can see that I can stay with one company. We have 290,000 employees, so you can imagine the number of different roles that in different locations they could go to internationally or, within the United States. And that's what they're looking for, right, is kind of that next step. What can they do differently? But we can offer that all within there. So when you go out and you give them this brochure and you say, here's the different careers, and here's how you get there, and here's the competencies and the training associated with it, they're like, oh, I can continue my education when I go to have the job, which is just a great attractor for kids coming right out of school. So they have the ability to change from there.
So Sharon, we talk about the STEM gap, and certainly at Walmart, you've seen that gap growing at exponential levels, and you're the person at the company in charge of figuring out, solving the problem. So what are you doing at Walmart to try to address this gap?
You bet. It's interesting because when I thought about this, and I always, whenever I have conversations, I have one slide that just is such our true north. So admittedly, I have it with me. But when we started out, we knew that we needed to focus on 2 sides of a Venn diagram. And the one was growing the size of the talent pool in the US and globally. And the left side of the Venn was getting our share of the talent pool. And we have to have certainly a number of things that I'll highlight in a moment that positions us to do that. And then of course there's initiatives that really cut across the Venn. So growing the size of the talent pool is where key strategic partners come into play. And one of the things that we have learned is, and we have talked about it since we've been together here, is there is a coalition that is needed for us to come together to grow the size of the talent pool inside the US and outside the US in these fields, or we'll never get there. And the left side of the Venn is where every one of us in each of our organizations, we have to have the brand, the career opportunities, the type of leadership, our ability to prioritize, and really having a compelling value proposition so that as we have this war for talent, that we've earned the right to be an employer of choice. And that has been our frame of reference around the programs and initiatives that we've developed and have really launched. So I think specifically I would highlight we have developed new channels, if you will, for identifying and recruiting talent into our company. But we also have realized that we have to recruit from within and recruit our own associates. We have 2.4 million associates around the world. And shame on us if we continue to look outside and we're not putting our efforts and our development opportunities inside the company. And that has really served us well. A very, very quick story, but it brings this to life, is we launched a new initiative. We call it very simply our field to home office program. And we've identified hundreds and getting close to thousands of people working in our stores and our distribution centers and our Sam's Club that have STEM degrees, but didn't find a way to really pursue that career. And we now have a program where we are identifying these associates, bringing them into Bentonville. We'll be doing this also around the world. reskilling them if needed in some of the technologies and analytics skills that we need them to have. And they have become a phenomenal channel for us. That was right in our backyard. In fact, one individual, he went to school full-time, worked full-time. We brought him in as an entry-level, in an entry-level role, and within 12 months, this young man is in our cybersecurity team. And oh, by the way, happens to be a single dad with 2 kids and an African American. So it's just an example of what's possible if we kind of get out of our own way.
Okay, in the second round, I want to talk a little more about what has not worked at your companies and what you're changing to better target these needs. And I know, Steve, you were looking at this and saying, can we design a program across the workforce that meets everybody's needs in a broad way, or doesn't that work? Do we have to do more of an individualized approach? Tell us about that.
So I want to share an anecdote and then kind of talk about the broader concept. Again, it's a personal anecdote. My son, Gavin, when he was about 10 years old, was at home. He's now 20. He was printing something off on the printer, and it was this beautiful piece of artwork. And I said, "Where'd you find that picture?" He goes, "Well, I did it." And I go, "What'd you do it in?" He goes, "I did it in Photoshop." And I said, "When did you learn Photoshop?" And he said, "Well, somebody in Malaysia taught me." And what he had created was this opportunity. He'd found a social way to connect with somebody in Malaysia who took control of his desktop and showed him the process of using Photoshop. And just let's remember these mobile devices we all carry now didn't exist 10 years ago, right? I mean, the iPhone came out right around 2006. And I think what I certainly feel is happening as a function of that is we are going to be dealing with a level of empowerment that our employees will have that we've never seen before. And along with that empowerment will come sort of a tremendous sense of individuality. It's expressed through social media. It's expressed in a lot of ways in this coming generation. And so that sort of idea of empowered learner, I'm an individual, I'm going to create my own pathway, I want to find a cause that I can identify with, that's going to be where I want to work. Those ideas coming together, are going to create a very different dynamic than the way we have thought about managing employees, developing employees, and the whole HR equation. And I think that what we have to be able to address in that scenario is this idea of an individualized learning path. And it comes by starting to break down jobs into skills, jobs into pathways, and then having the individual understand, well, I want to go here. Somebody else may want to go over there. But in order for me to get over here, big data is going to show us the pathway to get there. And I'm going to be able to individualize that. And I'm going to be able to say, all right, these are the skills that I need to develop to get there. And that the development of those skills, we have one technology we call Skilled Up that curates about 420,000 online courses. Most of those are free, right? So now imagine all of this coming together. And we talked about MOOCs as an example of a different way in which we can achieve large audiences. And I think we've got a very, very interesting set of dynamics that we have to pay attention to in terms of how we cultivate human capital, how we develop it. Because, the topic of discussion here is retention. And I believe if you find a disengaged employee that's a retention issue for you, you're going to find somebody that doesn't understand what their career path is, doesn't believe they're being developed, and doesn't really see where the broader opportunity is. And they're going to leave and go somewhere else. And they're going to be given more and more tooling to be self-empowered. So I think we've got to be good at giving them causes. We've got to be really great at treating them as individual learners, and then providing an environment in which they can be developed.
We used to think of training as an opportunity to send employees somewhere, maybe to a conference, and get some additional training. But of course, in tough economic times, travel is the first thing that companies cut back on. Budgets are constrained, and certainly in the defense industry with sequestration, there's been a scarcity for some of the defense companies in this area. What has BAE done to cope with this new environment?
So absolutely. I mean, we've been in the last couple of years, training is one of the first things that goes when your budgets get cut, and travel, of course, it goes with that. So we were in, a dilemma. Our employees, for retention purposes, want, training. They demand training, and frankly, it becomes, they need the training because our technologies that we use are constantly changing. And so what we did, and this came from a group of interns or young employees, had the idea of let's start our own really university. So we started something internally. We call it INS University. And they're colleges of different skill sets that you need. But basically what we've done is we've taken our employees that are experts in fields. So if you think about in some of the IT professions, people that are Cisco experts or cloud experts, or in our analysts, the tradecraft experts, and we gave them time and let them basically become the instructor. So we give them a time, in our world it's charge number if you work in that world, to actually build their curriculum and then teach the class. And then our employees take the course, and we offer it in different ways, but we use our own experts to teach these classes. Employees take them, and then if there's books and material that we need, so a lot of these are standard courses that you get industry certifications on, so we'll pay for the books and the material. And then when they want to go take the exam, because that's ultimately you want is for them to be certified in whatever that new technology is. If there's a certification, we'll pay for the exam. And what that did for us was give us the ability to train more employees, because even with the budgets we'd have, you'd have to pick and choose. Okay, this employee gets to go to the training, or this employee gets to go to the training, but the rest of them just can't do any training whatsoever. And the interesting thing is, Steve said, it's all about empowering the employees. You just start up the framework, you ask for volunteers. Of course, if you're an expert in a field, employees love to do that because they're, now they get to, show their expertise. And these are very technical people, so they really like to show that, they know it all. And it's really grown. It's employees volunteer to do the courses. I go and have meetings with our employees around our different sites, and they said it's the best thing because they can get a certification, and it's open to all employees. So not just within my business, but the other sectors that are part of it, we open it up because frankly, I've already paid for the instructor, so it's free, and it's really grown. And they add more courses to it based on what the employees are looking for. The thing we've done this year is now add more of a career path. As Steve was saying, you need to have, employees want to know where my career path is. So we've taken different skill sets that we need, or job categories, if you will, and said, okay, if you come in as a technician, what do you have to be a solution architect? And so what are the jobs you would have along the way, and what training do you need? And so employees have liked that, but it becomes sort of self-service too. And then the last thing we've done is we have employees that work on customer sites a lot of times, and so they have a day job, and a lot of them work in classified environments, so they don't even have access to their cell phone and things like that. So we've also started to deliver those training in multiple forums. So we do online training, we do classroom training, we videotape it so they can do it on a Saturday, and that's been really helpful to a lot of our employees to take advantage of it. So it's been a great way for us, for a very small amount of money, to deliver training to a large population of employees.
Jenny, what have you found at AT&T that wasn't working, and how did you adapt?
Yeah, I think, like any big company, there's always something not working. You just got to be able to try something new the next time. I think just, part of it is a recognition that skills, you come out of college, those skills are outdated in about 4 years, so just like software, right? And so like when we think about the old AT&T, the phone company, like we're, moving towards the software company, splitting the hardware from, the software. So it's like a whole new environment for all of our employees. And so when we first started our transformation, across AT&T and kind of doing our skills pivot, we started with our traditional old methods, right? Everybody's gonna have training, and we're gonna count the number of classes. And oh, by the way, you'll be on the bad report if you're not at a certain point. And does that sound familiar to anyone in the room? And so, we started that, and then we kind of took a step back and we said, you know what, it does have to be about individualized training paths for people. You have to tell them, what the roles are, what the expectations are. You have to have a huge communication plan around, storytelling, right, to make sure it's real. Because like anyone of a certain age, I think we all wait for change to just kind of go away, like the next initiative, like, oh, they're just talking about this initiative. So like, if we just wait a year, we probably should just wait to start the training because it's not going to matter. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things that was really important in the company aspect was that we recognized early on that we were going to need our employee skills. So versus surplusing and being able to hire in the skills that we need, we have a workforce that is very aging. But we also have a workforce that is very smart and deep in network skills, which you cannot get in the marketplace. So we needed those employees and we needed to retool them. And so kind of getting to the hearts and minds and souls of those employees and kind of bringing them back in was a really key piece of, trying to move forward. So everyone has, their role. We actually kind of went out there and said, you can opt in. Right, so we kind of went out on a limb and said, you can opt in, you can take those courses, you can design what you want to be out of these 83 roles, you can figure that out if you want to specialize in security or analytics or, whatever kind of technology drain there is. And then, so those people started kind of like opting in, but we also told them they have to do it on their own time. So we said, if you want to be relevant, we want you to be relevant, right? But, think about, the other hand, the company's taking a risk. We're going to make you relevant also in the industry. So we want you here, but we're going to invest, right? And so relevancy is really important. And the other thing it does for the workforce is it frees them. So once you're relevant, once you're not afraid to lose your job, you work in a much different way. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what we've been really focused on that we've learned by trial and error over the last, few years, because we always go back to the standby old, create a report, send it to their boss. Let's see if everybody's trained. And we've told people now, don't bother taking the classes, right, if you're not going to pivot. But the other part that's really important that I guess we've learned is the other parts of the talent strategy that have to go with it. So if we're going to expect to pivot people's skills, if we expect them to work in a different way in agile teams and be innovative, you can't have the same old policies. You can't have the same culture that you had before. And so we're pivoting all those things. And so making them part of it, getting them engaged, it feels very daunting at times, right? Because you're trying to move a whole workforce of people that have been around for a long time. But the one thing I think you find in any company is there is pride in their company. And so when you kind of bring them to the table to help with the solution and bring them in, then they all become part of, what that future can be. So time will tell. It's a long journey.
So Rosanna, Jenny mentioned aging workforce. Cigna has a challenge in this area as well. As I understand, more than half of your workforce is going to be retirement eligible in about a decade. That's a lot of people. What is Cigna doing in particular to address this challenge?
Yeah, that's specific to our technology organization, where when you think about the importance of technology, and certainly for Cigna, we consider technology a differentiator for us. So it's a big challenge, a highly disruptive challenge. And I think to add to the complexity of it, half of the workforce is retirement eligible, and the skill sets that we need, the competencies we need, are very different from the workforce that we historically recruited for. So it's meant we've tripled the number of people that we are actually recruiting from early career and college types of resources. But in doing so, we're bringing in very new skill sets. So the kind of mentoring that takes place in our environment isn't necessarily the transference of the knowledge that our experienced workforce has developed from what we might term legacy systems. We're bringing in young people who bring skill sets that are very different around app development, for example, as we know that our customers want to be able to access information readily off of their smartphones. And we're bringing in talent that it really is combining that technology skill set with the application of analytics. So it's really required creating what we heard earlier, a different culture. A culture that leverages what we consider part of our natural DNA, a volunteer culture. So as we attract talent, we're creating an environment where that talent actually expresses itself in different ways. And that partnership includes working with our philanthropic teams, our colleague resource groups, which are employee resource groups, through the diversity channels to really tackle some of the challenges that we see in communities and where employees have an ability to lend their skills, their know-how, to develop greater expertise, to develop experiences that may not come in their day-to-day jobs so they can be more versatile and agile. So the environment's getting younger, but what's really interesting is that we're recognizing is that to be young is to be knowledgeable in a very different way, and it's empowering the workforce, but it's also creating a different skill set, a different way in which people collaborate. So high levels of collaboration, high levels of innovation. Our technology development program is a really great example of that, where we bring in each year a number of new technologists, upwards of 100 people today, where just 6 years ago we were looking at 30, 40 people a year. And we're creating opportunities where this young talent really are taking on new assignments and new roles from the ones we've historically had in our organization. From a human resources standpoint, it means recreating what that career path looks like, or creating it anew, because there are different roles that are involved in the environment. And I think for some of the talent that comes into the organization, it's the excitement of being a part of an organization that has a mission to serve our customers by helping them improve their health, well-being, and sense of security. So rather than being micro-focused on the job at hand, it's really, how am I bringing myself into the environment to create new capabilities for our customers, new ways of thinking about how we impact the customer experience, whether it's through the use of technology or through that interaction, not only with us, but with our providers. And another thing that I would add to that equation, it was triggered by something I heard earlier. One of the things that we've taken on with our partners in technology is that we actually do joint talent reviews. So while we're looking at our own talent within Cigna, as we work with many partner providers, we actually work with those organizations as well, looking at the talent that they have that works with us to better understand those capabilities and ensure that there's alignment around how they're developing their talent to meet our needs and how we're developing talent so that there's a complementary capability in those areas that we may not consider core skills for Cigna, but are necessary to develop the workforce and to deliver the kinds of solutions that are required by the business.
Sharon, Rosanna, in a sense, was really talking about changing the paradigm. And I know at Walmart, you've had to change the paradigm and how you think about these things. What wasn't working and what did you do to change?
Yeah, I would tell you the thing that stands out the most to me and to us is the paradigm of giving ourselves permission to decide what we were not going to do. And I know that sounds so simple, but it's so real. The biggest challenge we had, and I would say this, we were trying to do way too much. We did not do a good job the first 12 months prioritizing, and we were not clear enough in holding ourselves accountable to what the KPIs and the metrics and the outcomes were going to be, that we were going to hold ourselves accountable so that we could earn the right, again, to be able to get support from the business and from our board to continue to invest in the programs and initiatives that we felt were so important. So we've gotten better. We've matured over the last, I'd say, 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, and we're really seeing a difference of being able to pick the right strategic partners. Of course, STEM Connector is one. And there's another organization, Step It Up, that focuses on inner city women, and they are training women for technical jobs in Walmart. And they are coming to Bentonville, and they are just doing a phenomenal job. Had we tried to do all of that the first year, we just didn't have any bandwidth, so we're getting smarter, and that's the biggest lesson that we have looked in a mirror and said, okay, we give ourselves a C maybe the first year, and I think maybe we're a B.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get to questions in about 5 to 7 minutes. And so for this final round of questions from me, this is a little bit of a lightning round, so you only have about 1.5 minutes. But what we're looking for are practical things that we can all do after we leave this conference, and you've outlined some of the challenges that we face. What is one thing, at least, that everybody can do when they go back to their office and start thinking and start putting things into action. And I'll start with you, Jenny. One piece of advice going forward.
I would say you really have to make an investment in what your future of your company is going to be, as well as what we're going to do all together. So I would say you've got to define what those roles and competencies are that you need for the future, because a lot of times we talk at a very high level, we need technical people. You've got to get really tactical. You got to bring it down to a level that everyone can understand, so you can forecast and really help move things forward. The other thing I would encourage people to do is, we have all kinds of performance goals. We give to employee giving campaigns. We do all kinds of great work. Why don't we all have a goal to try and move someone alternatively into our companies that we normally wouldn't hire and take a chance, right? I mean, I'm not saying just set a goal for diversity or anything like that, but really get it in your culture for your company, for your leaders to be part of it. They've got to give back too. It takes all the arms and legs.
Sharon?
Yeah, I think that this is really hard to say, and it goes back to what I just said as far as focus and priorities, but women's economic empowerment is really important to us in Walmart, and we are going to lean in, and we've leaned in a lot, but we're going to lean in even more with, again, the right strategic partners in women in technology. And we're doing a lot, but we've got to accelerate that. And certainly throughout the day, I'm sure we'll hear more and we'll learn more from each other, but we're going to win at that.
Rosanna?
Rethinking the paradigms that we operate under. Certainly, we've succeeded in our companies up to this point, but if we think about it, what got us here won't get us there. So it really requires the ability to reinvent, and as we reinvent the systems and processes, we have to think about how you reinvent the culture. So we recognize managing change is a critical part of that equation.
Diet?
On culture, I would say it's really about building a culture of continuous learning. I mean, you have to, it's from every position and every level. This is about technology, and it's constantly changing, so everybody has to be a continuous learner. And the second part of that is when you're looking at your training and development for your employees, you got to completely reinvent. You got to continuously reinvent it and be flexible in the offerings and listen to your employees. Ask your employees what it is that they're looking for. And how do they want it delivered? Because that is a big part of it. So the flexibility in that, employees will tell you. But it's really about having a culture of continuous learning.
Steve?
One statistic that I've been looking at is, in the aggregate, U.S. employers today, they spend more money on talent acquisition than they do on talent development. They're out pilfering that talent they need from some competitor or other company as opposed to developing it internally, and that's in the aggregate numbers. So my challenge to everybody here, if you care about STEM, create a STEM apprenticeship. Gear that STEM apprenticeship at a younger age demographic in your enterprise. Do it in partnership with higher education, where you now can help. They need to shift their model to the way you want that individual developed over that apprenticeship. Start to change the idea of what an apprenticeship is, that it's for plumbing trades, and that it's actually an open-ended idea about how we develop younger talent, and start to stop thinking about sort of, I get educated for 4 years, and then I go to work, and shift it like this, and then blend it, and work in partnership with employers this way, and do it as a lifelong endeavor, because even though I'm saying start a STEM apprenticeship for a younger age, the churn of skills that are going to be in this next generation, if we don't solve the lifelong learning challenge and do this, in partnership with higher education, higher education is going to be irrelevant. So, my challenge would be do a STEM apprenticeship, do it in partnership with higher education, and challenge the status quo of how we educate and actually how we fund the educational process, because we got way too many students graduating with too much student debt. And I think employers are part of the answer to that.
Okay, those are great suggestions, and thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the floor? This is your opportunity. Go ahead, this gentleman. Do we have a microphone? Right up here, first table, and then I saw a hand in the back. Oh, okay, we're going to go this, and then we're going to go to you. Okay.
Thanks. Dennis Bonilla from University of Phoenix. What are you doing around in your organizations for satisfying that entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial, innovative itch that drives retention and engagement? So rather than having people leave to start up a company or having people get frustrated because every year you go through the brainstorming process that give me your top 10 ideas and you don't have time to implement two through 10, you might work a little bit on one. Many companies now are figuring out a pathway for driving entrepreneurship and innovation. Can you share what you're doing in your companies?
I can start just real quickly. So both our e-commerce business in the Valley and really even around the world, not just in Bentonville, we do, like many other tech companies, we do meetups, people come together, we do hackathons, we do those probably every quarter in Bentonville. We have probably 100 people now inside of the Walmart Tech organization that have earned patents. We celebrate those every year at our year beginning meetings. We recognize them. So to your question, we're learning how to do exactly what you said, that people can just explore and innovate and just love what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then can see the impact that innovation can have on the size of our population and our customer base.
One of the things we have kind of two scenarios. One, in the defense industry, you do a lot of proposals, and so if you want to, I always encourage any employees, and if you want to get into management, you're going to have to learn to do proposals. And so new business, it's all about being creative from a technical standpoint, but even from a pricing, and you have to write it, and you have to tell a story. And so I tell employees from just an experience, it's a great experience, and if you want to get into management, you're going to have to learn to do it. And so that's one area. The other thing we do, really in the technology area, is we do sort of Shark Tank type things. So employees have an idea in any level, in any group, and they have an idea. And our CTO runs this, and they have to come with their idea with a short business case, but who you're going to sell it to, and then we give them funding. And let them go off and develop, and they have really stages. So they and they present them, and they have to, somewhat like a competition, but it literally can be, you have an idea, I've got, here's some funding to go do something with it, and that could be to buy equipment or do things. And then third thing that we're doing, and it's really become a culture, is having everybody in the organization thinking about continuously process improvement or improvement. And so as I tell the employees, I don't do a lot of the processes. People do that for me now. But I've grown up and through my career have been in that employee where you have some process that you have to go through. It could be the system that you use is clunky, So I challenge them and say, if we can do this, if we're doing a process and it takes 10 steps, if you can figure out a way to do it in 3 steps, then raise your hand and volunteer and say, let's go figure out how to do this, and really empowering the organization to say, how can we do things better to be a more agile business, and it takes some of the pain out of the process, because no matter what kind of company you have, everybody has processes, and there's always something that's, I say clunky, it takes too long to get something done. So I try to empower them to say, bring your innovative idea and let's go implement it, but you have to show action on it, and that's the real thing.
Okay, let's go to our question in the back.
Hi, my name is Pat Thibodeau. I'm a reporter with Computer World. This is a question for Ms. Wibben. You described a situation where an employee at Walmart in some capacity became a cybersecurity professional in your company. Can you unpack that a little and explain how that actually happens, how you identify people within your 2.4 million workforce who have skills, and are you, say, spending more now on internal training development today than, say, you were previously?
Yeah, I'll do it real quick, I promise. So we went out to the HR community and then to our business partners in the stores and clubs and distribution centers and through our communication internally on our own websites, and just said, we are looking for STEM talent, and we needed people that had graduated in these fields within the last 24 months, so we knew the technology was relevant, and we need associates in these parts of the world. And it started slow, and we had to learn how to do it, but we were stunned at the number of STEM graduates working in our stores and clubs and distribution centers. So it wasn't hard to do once we got a rhythm and learned how to do it. I would tell you just very quickly that there certainly we've had to make sure that if they were not relevant in some of the areas that we needed because of the technology changes, we leaned in and did very specific development sessions. But they had been really keeping their skills up. So I want to be mindful of time, and certainly I can follow up on anything else. But I hope I answered your question. I don't know if I left anything out.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
He gave me the 0-minute sign. So that's.
Well, our panelists are going to be here. Let's give them a round of applause.